Beautiful viewer, welcome back. We have an awesome topic today, somatic command. This may meander just a tad. It's a deep topic, a great topic, and it's one that may ruffle a few feathers, and that's okay. We're gonna go there. So look, to start, the topic of somatics, the topic of embodiment, has changed. Recently, it has become relegated to the domain of, a lot of people use the term nervous system regulation, but what they really mean is parasympathetic engagement or control. They talk about people being excited or nervous or fearful, and then in the moments that follow, trying to find a way to downregulate the nervous system, to reduce sympathetic arousal, to regain control over mind and body in the moments that follow. And this is fantastic. This is part of what we do. Later in the video, I'm going to talk about four skins, not four skins, four different skins. And you are likely in one of those four categories, or you've got a double dominance, most likely. But it is just one of those skins, or maybe the combination of two, right? The asset, which is closely related to the empath or the sensate, and then the shapeshifter, the body of that which can adapt and liberate. So these are the two that most strongly correlate with the parasympathetic nervous system, or what most consider nervous system regulation. But it's only part of the story. We are extremely dynamic and have a ton of range. And to reduce what we can do, to reduce nervous system regulation to just a subset of these orientations is a mistake. Now, I'm somebody that's practiced martial arts for over 3 decades, which makes me feel old as hell. But I learned really early on the range that we have within us, and we need to be able to perform under pressure, where there's tension, where there's expectation, where there's fear. And the contrary to that, the calm, the soothing, maybe the bright and joyful kind of outlook, it doesn't fit. Right? A lot of people try to sell this message and it fails under pressure. And what we need to try to do is cultivate the capacity to perform in a wide range of settings, because our body is hardwired for it. Your nervous system is hardwired for it. And we aren't just fighting and fleeing under pressure, and that's a negative state. And then the positive state is feeling easy and peaceful and calm and all those lovely things. And they are lovely, it's just not the whole story. So, there are a few factors that we're going to hit in this discussion. And I want to start at the end, which may or may not make sense yet, but it will. So we're going to hit the regulators, and I'm going to lead with those in terms of their inverse or their negative properties. And then we're going to move into the skins, and then we are going to move into capacity. Now, normally, the training process is the opposite of this, but to understand them well, it's much easier to work in reverse, okay? Now, for years, I'm currently in the States, but for years I lived and taught in Shanghai. I had the premier mind, body, and martial arts training studio in Shanghai for a number of years. And I took leaders and high performers through 100-day transformation processes. These were brutal and intense, and I had a bit of a reputation for that, but it was also one that carried me forward for many years in terms of credibility and authority in the domain. But to have real transformation in, let's say, 2 to 3 months, or in this case, 100 days, something had to take place. There needed to be a dying of sorts or a failure of sorts. And this would always occur between weeks 5 and 7 in this process. Reasons being, the first 3 weeks are a honeymoon phase, and then the weeks that follow are a little bit of a transition. Okay, I'm settling in. It's no longer the sexy thing that I signed up for. It's becoming hard work. And then around week 5, week 6, week 7, there is what you would call a crisis of confidence, where okay, the tools that got me here are not working anymore. The ways that I fronted for the world and flexed and proved that I was a competent, capable individual, they're not working in the gym so much. And I might need to grow in order to compensate. When I say mind-body, this isn't a soft practice. This would look at the strongest attributes of strength, flexibility, meditation, nutrition as core pillars of training, and they wouldn't be the soft stuff. They would take you to the edge. They would be intense physical training sessions, long and focused meditation sessions, deep stretching sessions. So much so that each one of these pillars would have a dramatic impact on the psychosoma of the trainee, meaning not only would the body change, but their orientation, their mentality would actually change to give them new attributes and skills by the end of it. The father who was too stubborn and reactive with his child, by the end of 100 days, focusing on flexibility, would realize he had more space to attune and listen and adapt. The CEO who found himself being a pushover at work and had a lack of confidence after losing a relationship, for example, found himself after 100 days of deadlifting with the courage and the strength to stand before the owner of the company and demand his worth. These are psychological shifts that don't come from thought processes or faking it till you make it or telling yourself to think or act a certain way. It comes from a new body, new capacities that give you the ability to show up differently and to know who you are in those moments. It's a profound shift. But to get there, we have to get to a place where what you think you know and who you think you are isn't sufficient to go further. This is always the point where people consider quitting. It's where the body is exhausted, where the mind just doesn't want to show up, and you're really confronted with your own perception of self. So, getting into the regulators. It's in these moments when you start to realize that you're failing and things get really tough where the regulators show up on force. The regulators are structure, attention, and breath. These are critically important, and they're worth spending weeks, months, years on in terms of cultivating for yourself, because we'll get to that. They give you control over your body and your mind. And with people in these categories, like these 100-day transformations, this is profound work for them. Now, we're not talking about their relationships or their business within these settings, but the transformational impact of them is happening without those conversations. So many people will focus on the trauma, will focus on the deficits, will focus on why they feel inadequate, and most of it gets resolved with squats and with breathing. Go figure, right? If you could just solve 90% of what you think are cognitive limitations by strengthening your system, why not do both? You look better, you feel better, and the problems just disappear. This isn't across the board or in all cases. Therapy is still incredibly important, but there is a lot of stuff that emanates from just cognitive processing. Thinking creates its own problems, and a lot of times going down a level into the body, fixing those issues in terms of structure, attention, and breath resolves a lot of the issues that we think are character flaws. Now, to build them up, we have to understand how they break down. So, when people would be in the middle of these sessions and in the shit, body's trembling, mind is starting to weaken, they always show up. Now, how they show up matters, and they show up in different sequences, and then these reveal the skins to come. But each one of us will deteriorate in predictable ways. Structure will give out in one of two primary ways. It will brace or it will melt. Bracing looks just as you would expect it to. The pressure is on and I start to generate more tension, more resistance, and push back, right? The person that you find that is highly reactive, that is often a resisting type psychosoma. We go to the other side in melting. And melting is when we have the opposite of structure, right? We don't over-brace, we don't even find center, we just melt. Melt forward, or melt back, or turn sideways. We try to hide and shrink ourselves from the pressure that's in front of us. Now, to understand why these are structural failures, you have to understand where a centered and balanced frame comes from. When we talk about structure, we can go back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of evolution history, where our bodies have evolved to resist the force of gravity. As all animals and all creatures on Earth, it's the one dominant force that we have to combat. Now, there's a lot of other forces, and those make up our full musculoskeletal system. But the one enduring force from birth to death, gravity. And our frame is stacked up against that, but there are two composite parts, tension and compression members. The compression members of the body are bone. The tension members are tendons, ligaments, muscle, and often what we would group under myofascia. Stacking the bones effectively reduces the pressure of gravity. Okay, as soon as I get off my axis a little bit, then the weight of gravity starts to weigh on the head, the back, the lower back, and all of these things start to compound and add pain. If you know anybody with back pain or that constantly complains about that, watch where they hang their head. Look at their shoulders. Are they constantly arching forward? This is the force of gravity compounded over months, years to have lasting negative impact. Now, the balance in this system is not like a lot of people would imagine, where you've got maybe a building, you're stacking bricks on top of each other, and it's a strong, rigid system. This is more like a suspension bridge. Okay, it finds balance by stacking bones, but finding a balance of tension that distributes force across the entire frame. This is an extraordinary thing. Look at a suspension bridge if you haven't, but they are not fixed. They flex and they move the same way that our bodies do. And so to find symmetry, first of all, there has to be balance in the system, meaning stacking your bones against gravity, and then starting to find a fluid and relaxed state of suspension that's within that. Now, that suspension, we don't have conscious control over what our tendons and ligaments are doing at a nuanced level, most of us, but what we do control is muscular tension and relaxation. At least we can with training. The balance between these, right? You need enough tension to keep upright, but you need to be relaxed enough so that you're fluid, you're not rigid, your body has mobility in it. That is what we can call center. And so these two manifestations or deteriorations for structure are just overcompensations in one of this direction, right? We need tension to retain upright posture and structure, but we generate excessive tension when we're threatened, and we push back and we start to resist. And on the other side, if we can't handle that tension, if it's too much, too confronting, we release tension from the system and we melt, we collapse, we implode. This is an incredible story, okay? And this will fall on what we call the tension axis of our mind-body model, which I'll go into a little bit more in the skins section. Attention breakdowns are when somebody is either letting in too much information, or what we call porous attention, right? I'm overwhelmed by how much information is in the environment, or so much is going on, or I'm just feeling so weak and overwhelmed that everything is weighing down on me. No offense to those in the trauma camp, but a lot of people that talk about all of their traumas today put themselves in this category constantly, where it's just too much. I just can't handle it. I've got to escape. I've got to go to your happy place. I've got to go to a safe place where I can just remove the triggers, right? And then I can find a way to center myself. That is often a deterioration in that category, in the asset skin, in the empath skin. We'll talk about that. The other deterioration is in tunneling or in hyperfocusing. And that's exactly what it sounds like. You're looking through a tunnel, your senses get turned off, your sensitivity gets turned off. All there is focus on one particular point of attention. Now, to understand this, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. And I think these are so cool. But the first one is very simple. We could go back a long time, again, hundreds of thousands of years, or look at the animal kingdom, but there are a couple of ways that the eyes function in general, in nature, but we can reduce it to what the functions might be if we have to find food or look for ways of surviving. So the first one might be a distributed form of attention. I'm looking at the horizon in the distance, okay? And when I do that, it's a soft gaze. My attention is distributed, my peripheral vision is engaged, and I'm taking in an extraordinary amount of information, of data. The other one is when I get close up. Maybe I saw the animal in the distance. Maybe I go in for the hunt. Or for you vegetarians out there, you find a berry tree out there and you go to pick some. So you get closer to the the thing that you got to attack. Okay, you found your food, now you got to go pick it, pluck it, kill it, whatever it might be. And so then the attention starts to narrow, right? The hunter starts to come into play here. And the vision finds a clear focal point. But the eyes actually do this. And this is, I mean, if you hold up your finger, or, well, it won't work if you look at mine. I'm in 2 dimensions for you. But when I do it, I can look at my finger right here and everything else is out of focus. Or I can look just past my finger at the camera's in focus, and now I can see the full periphery, but my finger is no longer in focus. These are the 2 sides of the attention axis or spectrum. Again, we'll talk about that interplay under the skins. But these 2 are correlated, and we could call it the axis of attention or the axis of consciousness, because not only do the eyes do this, but our mind switches and flutters between these 2 brainwave states: attention, alpha states, and awareness, theta states. And these are not exclusive states, but the brain flutters back and forth between these 2 on a regular basis. The training process of meditation is one where we actually find a state of coherence and stability within that. I hold focus for a little bit longer. I sustain awareness for a little bit longer. And at high levels of energetics and Qigong practice, these 2 merge where you're able to hold both states at the same time. Very cool stuff. And so we see then how the mind starts to break down under these pressures. The story is told by what the eyes are doing, right? The eyes become fierce and focused and tunneled when I try to resist and focus on the problem. So I'm overwhelmed, and what do? I organize myself into a single point. I take all of my energies and harness them in one point of focus. Or I reduce that and I just am feeling everything and it's too much and it's overwhelmed. I almost gave you guys the positive attributes there in a second, how to utilize them. But it's one of these 2 ways. And we can easily see the negative impacts. When I focus like this, I lose awareness of what's going on around me. It's very easy to see in the case of self-defense or of martial arts, because as soon as tunnel vision happens, my peripheral dies. I stop sensing, feeling, adapting, noticing, and it's just one thought process. And that's going to be binary. Either it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, it's because you're not noticing anything else that's happening around you. And on the other side, when you can't organize your attention, it's just a flood of information. It's complete overwhelm. And so the eyes will either do this, absolute focus, which if it's done to the detriment of your awareness, it's tunneling, okay? It's a failure. And then the other side of it is I'm just taking in too much, I can't organize myself, and I implode. Now, these are the 4 failures that are the biggest tells. So I, as a coach, putting people through these processes that would last 100 days, like I said, in this interim phase, now people have minor breaks and fractures along the way. Every time that you fail within a workout or fail within a meditation session, it's because your eyes, your attention, or your body is doing one of these faults, right? But when somebody hits a point of extreme deterioration, when they're thinking about quitting, where it's an identity issue, now all 3 of these come into play, including the 3rd, which is the breath. Now the breath is what everybody talks about, and that's what people focus on. And that's the fight or flight breath, coming up into the chest, heart's racing, narrow, high, up here, and it's just... And it feels like the anxiety breath. It feels like the fear breath. It feels like the tension or stress breath. And it can even occur in low dose segments, right? Somebody might be sitting at home and just feeling that anxiety where the breath is imploding and it's just super short. It's just super short and overwhelming and narrow, but it lives up here, okay? And it still mimics the same breath pattern. And this can occur in one of two ways, but they fall into the same category: hypoventilation, hyperventilation. You're either overbreathing to compensate to bring in more air, or you start to undercut your own energy and just subdue the breath, even though it's still placed in the same location. And that would be an example of freezing, right? There isn't this, it's just complete shutdown. But we could just call it the fight or flight breath up in the chest, and you notice that somebody is starting to lose control of their ability to regulate their breath. Now, seeing these three play out is incredible. And noticing them in yourself is an extraordinary, empowering ability, because as soon as you start to notice how you deteriorate, just ask the reflective question. Let's say you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off or does something stupid. What's the first thing that you lost control of? Was it the breath? Was it the attention? Was it the structure? Right? And as soon as you can start to identify your order of deterioration, you'll also understand your dominant skin, which is how you tend to show up under pressure, and most likely when you don't have a lot of capacity in that arena. So, very cool stuff. These are the deteriorations, the inverse, the regulators, structure, tension, breath. We'll come back to them at the very end, because commanding those three is the penultimate goal for somebody that wants psychosomatic control, somatic control, mind-body control, embodiment. These are the skills that give you control over the hardware. Now, why this matters. As I mentioned, I work with people that were high performers is a fine term, but let's say people that wanted to do big things, artists that wanted to create and produce more, entrepreneurs that wanted to build that next level business, CEOs that wanted to maintain an edge in a room of big swinging dioks, okay? Power players. Now, there are a few reasons this stuff matters, which transitions into the skins that we're about to get into and why they're so relevant. The first is that they eliminate drag. What do we mean by drag? Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, that includes you two ladies, talked about between stimulus and response there is space to choose. This is one of the most important and profound insights that anybody can have, and he discovered it during the Holocaust in a concentration camp, which is even more extraordinary. We are constantly facing stressors and triggers. And his insight is that between that thing and our interpretation or response to that thing, there is space. And with training, it can become more space. And the training that we are talking about in this video is how you create that space. Now, why this is so important for high performers and leaders is that one of the biggest drags, right? You're a boat going through water, and the resistance of the water is drag. It's pulling against you, and so you need more fuel and more energy, and you're fighting. You're fighting the ocean, you're fighting the lake. And so you can reduce that drag or the loop or the processing by finding more space between the stimulus and response. This is huge for people that want to do big things. Why? Because one of the biggest hindrances to progress is the inability to get beyond your own patterns, or what we call the loop, right? So there's stimulus and response, and once we've practiced it enough, that response becomes automated. In the beginning, we do it because it's effective. It works for us. It gets some result, positive or negative, but something that gives us a sense of security. But oftentimes, as we grow, those become limiting patterns, even though they once served us. Okay, so this loop is that now I'm faced with the same trigger. I've got the same response, but I'm not even consciously aware that I'm doing it. I'm reacting before there's even time and space to process. For somebody that wants to do big things, this should be an obvious limitation and detriment to your path, right? And this is why people worked with me in Shanghai under these programs and processes, is that this costs you time or money over and over and over again. Now imagine this. Same trigger, you've seen it 100 times. Could be a colleague at work, could be a conversation with a partner at home, could be a child doing some weird shit that just triggers you. Whatever it is, the same thing happens. Now imagine a couple more moments, maybe a second, maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds. We're in there, you don't have an initial response or reaction. All you have is awareness of the experience. You're able to observe it without judgment. And then you're able to formulate a conscious response to that thing. This brings us to the flip side of this equation, which is not only now am I feeling the drag of life and conditioned patterns, I'm gaining conscious access to wider range, which brings us to the skins. Most of us mistake these nervous system capacities and orientations for personality. And once you start to see what each one of these are in their pure sense, in their distinct sense, you realize, oh my God, I know somebody in each one of these categories, and they have no control over that skin. It is their absolute persona. It's how they show up in body and mind and focus, in the way that they react, in the way that they love or give, or all these different ways of behaving in the world. It comes from a conditioned way of responding to pressure. That's an extraordinary insight. And the more that you train these things, just as I mentioned at the beginning of the video here, consistently, we would find that some of these training attributes, when they were picked properly and trained with intensity, they would manifest new range and new psychosomatic personalities, for lack of a better word, but expression. I can be anybody in the next few moments. I can choose how I want to show up. So, who doesn't want that? Now, if you are trying to do big things, however defined in your life, or you are coaching somebody trying to do big things in their life, how is this not everything? How is this not the most important thing that matters? Reduce drag on your performance and increase optionality and range. You can be anyone. You don't have to be limited by the patterns that have been conditioned at a time that you weren't consciously aware of how much control and power you possess. It's fucking cool. All right, look, hell of a tirade, and I love this topic. Hopefully you do too. We're doing some good work. I'm going to talk now about the skins, which are the 4 nervous system orientations that dictate how you show up. We can say under pressure, but the truth is all the fucking time. All right? These are heavily conditioned nervous system patterns and orientations that at once were a single act of organization and genius when we were children, right? Pressure sets in, and then I had, at one moment, this could have been accumulating, okay? I'm a baby, I'm crawling around, I'm playing with stuff. I'm slowly learning skills of how to tense myself and how to resist and how to relax and do the whole thing, and maybe even pay attention to a game and how to listen and hear. And so I'm gradually developing all of these attributes, but then there is one moment of pressure that distills them into a coherent response that signals, this is the safest way for me to deal with this pressure and this problem. And that is one of 4 ways. It's either resist and tense, it's either yield and relinquish, it's focus or reason, and it's sense and feel. And each one of these orientations is incredibly powerful and profound, and that's why we tend to live into them over many, many years, and they become dominant orientations. And if you don't know yours, link in the description. We've got a 15-question quiz, takes about 2 to 3 minutes to take. It's quite accurate. We've put a lot into this. You're probably going to test to one of these 4 skins or double dominance, but if you get combo, respond to the email you get with your results. I will personally look up your combination results to give you the specific breakdown of which ones may be dominant even within a combination of all 4. The incredible insight from this is that we have the range of all 4 living within us. But because we have conditioned and trained certain patterns more than others, they become dominant expressions that we default to unconsciously. These fall into the category of the conditioned skin, where once they were genius, emergent, the perfect solution to pressure when we didn't have the language or understanding to coordinate a response, our body gave us the answers. Now they've been repeated and trusted, but oftentimes they've been trusted into an arena that outlasts its usefulness unless we find clear direction, right? So you might find somebody with the warrior skin, the one who starts with resistance or tension, going into a domain like law enforcement or the military or CrossFit as a training model. Any one of these things where they are rewarded for that orientation. You find somebody that's the sage, the one who focuses. doing heavy mental work. They might do computer programming. They might play chess as a hobby, right? Something like this, where all of the attention is up here, largely not much below the neck, right? The body tends to operate as a brain taxi for sages. We get into the shapeshifter, and this is somebody that might fall into the domain of artistic expression or something that rides the waves of literal waves. Could be a surfer, for example. But somebody whose dominant attribute is yielding, flexing, going with the flow, adapting in real time. Also people in other creative arts and creative design work fall into this category because they constantly need to find new solutions and work with a complex data field and not get stuck in one particular category. And then we find the asset, also commonly known as the empath or the sensate. And this skin is organized through sensation, feeling, largely below the neck. It's taking in all this data and information, and it's not reasoning an outcome. It's relying on intuition and coherence to walk through what feels right in this moment. And this is possible because the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind can work at like 40,000 times the capacity of the conscious mind. There's a lot that we're able to take in. The assets, the sensates, have greater access to this information. They're highly sensitive people. And they fall into the categories of the healers, the yogis, the empaths, and work that largely tends to reward sensory feeling. Now you might say, okay, Tom, but at the beginning of the video you said this was about empowerment, and you're talking about how each one of these characters can largely act as a prison once they're conditioned, because just like we talked about under the regulators, once we have a conditioned response, we're no longer free to operate under new circumstances, make new choices, and that is the problem of these orientations. They become conditioned, they become rote. We're no longer consciously aware, and they also are limited in that range. Clear examples. The warrior who might have a shapeshifter or asset partner, right? The male warrior who might have a sensate wife, might have conflicts with that person where they're trying to force their will on the other person, and all they need is greater sensitivity or more space, right? So rather than to deteriorate into that tension, what they need to do is learn to release, right? And find that space and center first so that they can react with more range. You might find the asset who has tremendous sensitivity in the moment, but they find themselves working with somebody or talking to somebody who isn't that sensitive, right? The focus of the sage or the tension of the warrior, both of which are numbing attributes. Tunneling and tension numb the senses. And so the hypersensitive empath who wants to move the room through their awareness and sensitivity and intuition is consistently shoved down in these environments because those people just don't have that. They can't feel that. And so for the asset then to learn in some ways to contain that sensitivity and then to activate focus or to activate tension gives them access to be able to move, manipulate, and influence rooms of people that are dominated by these other skins. Super cool, okay? So how, you might ask, do we do that if we have these dominant attributes and they work for us and they're conditioned and there is a progression? And so I'm not going to break this down in terms of each one of these. If you want to know that in a deep way, we recently released the Somatic Skins from Capacity to Command. Super proud of the book. It's just awesome. And it is a compound book of both narrative, the story of Alira, who is an exiled, a gal exiled from her warrior culture because she failed to pass a test, and then who has to go through trials of capacity development and learn command of the regulators. And it's a beautiful, epic narrative that then is juxtaposed with the science and theory of the skins model that will teach you how to go from point A, ground zero of the conditioned skin, to owning your skin fully in terms of the evolved skin, which is where we are right now. That link is also in the description. But so, to go from a point of unconscious conditioning into conscious command, there are a couple of stages. The first one is should be obvious, but it's control over your own skin. So there are levels or grades of development in each one of these. You could have low capacity or you could have high capacity, which means you've developed it, you're consciously aware of it. And this happens through mind-body training, through structural training. And so this might look like, for example, the warrior skin who learns to generate tension early, but can't do it with control. They can't do it with predictive accuracy. They're not even conscious they're doing it. That's a low-grade warrior development who is just defaulting to a nervous system orientation. Sympathetic arousal, tension and structural rigidity, and bracing, right? That's just my go-to solution. But the conscious warrior is one who cultivates that capacity, who actually understands how and when and the nuances of developing and organizing those responses and choosing the extreme response, the extreme tension, the extreme pressure only when it's absolutely necessary. And the other times they're aware, okay, this is a choice to go to that place. That's a weapon if I choose to engage it. Just as all the skins can be weaponized, they can also be liberating factors, which comes to the second part. After you become consciously aware of that skin and have cultivated it, right? The warrior who does the CrossFit or the powerlifting, the asset who does the Reiki or the meditation, the sage who does the heavy intellectual work. You've already cultivated those orientations and know how to move into that quadrant. Then after that, you look at the compensatory skin or attribute. And that's how we start to move into greater range. So, as I alluded to earlier, the model that we have is exceedingly simple, but exceedingly profound. I have used this for over 10 years with elite performers to give them conscious range of all four skins. It works, and that's why we continue to do it. It's an incredible model, but it's so simple. So we've got the x-axis, and I'll pop this on the screen so you can see it. I'm not sure which way you're looking, but along the x-axis, you've got the warrior skin, you've got tension on one side, and then you've got relaxation on the other. And if you remember from the beginning of our talk, these are the two balancing forces of symmetry in your tensegrity structure, in finding balance in space. When they are out of balance, when there's too much tension, we find a domineering personality. And when you find too much relaxation, we find, at worst, a pushover, somebody who collapses, and at best, an adaptable shapeshifter. Right? Somebody who can surf the waves of reality. These two lie on the spectrum of tension and relaxation and the ability to float between. Now, just to use the warrior as our case in point, once they've gained a little bit, a modicum of awareness around that trait and that skin, the first order of business is to balance that skin with its antithesis, with the shapeshifter, with relaxation. So they will need to start adopting some of those practices. Now, you know people like this. You know the warrior that will not step into a yoga class. You know the warrior that will just ignore flexibility training or avoid meditation because they are so dominant in that trait. And ironically, it is the thing that we want to avoid the most that gives us the greatest chances of transcendence, of healing, of moving into a space of wider range and just greater evolution in our lives. It's incredible. But it's through that other doorway that we find center and balance, right? Which gives us then the ability not to deteriorate, not to lose structural stability as a point of control. That's that point of balance. That's the warrior. So now let me give one more example for the asset, which, you guys tend to be the dominant skin in this world of somatic development, so you get special treatment here. The asset now, as we talked about, is sensational overwhelm, sensory overwhelm, or sensory processing. You're taking in a lot of information. This deteriorates when we can't control it. So the first thing that we do is develop that skin, most often done through meditation, but it can also be done through other avenues. It can be done through music. It can be done through opening the senses and finding a through line, right? In music, you might be highly sensitive and moved by the music, but until you organize that in terms of a full song or an orchestral set or whatever it is, something that actually harnesses that attention and allows you to have direction for that sensation, now you can start to control and command it, because it's not complexity and overwhelm in the moment, it's sensation that has a through line or an anchor. In meditation, that would be the third eye, the philtrum, the dantian, the solar plexus, even observing the breath, something that anchors the mind while you're expanding your awareness and opening your attention, something that anchors the mind that is continuous. And so that's how that person would first develop their skin, sitting in meditation, playing music. But the strength of it comes through the concentration practices and bringing that organization from here, below the neck, the body, up into an organized and focused response. Music, reading, chess, something that doesn't allow you to default and then distribute your attention again, but sustains it through that process. Okay? That is on the y-axis of attention. We could also call it the axis of consciousness, as we talked about. This is the one that is fluctuating between focused attention and open awareness. Again, tell me this shit isn't cool. It's very fucking cool. Excuse the profanity. I do that at 2 times, talking about somatic stuff, and when I'm eating a great meal, I will just start. Profanity shall fly. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, so that's developing your dominant skin and then balancing it on the same axis. So the asset or the sensate will balance their particular skin by incorporating more of the sage and vice versa. The warrior will balance it with the shapeshifter and vice versa, but they're still on the same axis. So the tension proclivity hasn't yet transferred over into the attention, and the attention one hasn't yet transferred over into the tension one. So the final stage to make this an evolved and conscious skin is to develop access to all 4, because the truth is you're going to find performance limitations if you cannot, like we could, again, let's walk through one skin. The warrior who isn't able to focus is tension without direction. But the next level is, what are you going to do with a warrior that can't adapt, right? Everybody that we know, Bruce Lee, fucking Yoda, all these guys, right? When you're using the force, it's not just about tension and aggression and will. There is sensitivity and there's an awareness to the flux of time that you have to adapt to and perceive in real time and constantly adapt and adjust. And then sensitivity. How are you wielding your power? Is this the right moment to go all in? Or am I sensitive to the shifting dynamics and the complexity of the moment, perceiving all those things? It's very easy to see how any one of these skins will be exponentially amplified by the acquisition of the other 3. And that's the premise. So cultivation of yours, balance across its axis, and then expanding into the range of all 4. Make sense? If not, leave comments, ask questions, or better yet, come train this shit with us at the Prestige. It's what we do at our Applied Somatics Academy. It's fucking awesome. Amazing events, amazing community. We talk about this stuff on the regular, and we actually train it, condition it, and through our events, we throw you into a new world in almost every month where you are expected to attend to and apply your own somatic orientation and acquire new skills under pressure. And they're not meant to be processed cognitively. They're meant to be felt and adapted to. Super cool. Which brings me now into the next category of capacity, because you're probably asking, well, okay, how do I do that? And a lot of people will think, oh, I just need, this week I'm just going to be more warrior, and I'm just going to call on the warrior, and this week I'm going to be more sensitive, and I'm just going to call on more asset, and that's the way this is going to go. And if only it was that simple. Now, for somebody that is trained, your 10-year practitioner of yoga, your 10-year practitioner of martial arts, possibly dance, possibly some of these other categories that integrate by design all of these attributes, because they are ancient orientations. We did not create them. All we did was codify them. They're in all of us. They have been forever, since the beginning of time. So if you're developed, you've already seen these in yourself. You know how to access them, and it might just be more conscious intention to call them forward. But for most of us, I've already talked about each skin can have high and low capacity, meaning the low capacity individual is one that is untrained but still has a dominant orientation. This happens all the time. The high capacity individual is still dominant. They still have a preferred or default skin, but they've actually conditioned it to be an empowered state of performance. The conditioning is obvious, right? And again, we take the warrior. You do things that teach you structural and tensional development. CrossFit's a good example. Powerlifting, preeminent example. Sports that also include structural and tensional development, like martial arts, like yoga. Yoga with its held poses, martial arts with its structured stances and striking. All of these teach you to organize your structure against the force of gravity and tension in one or more directions. But as we suggested, it means you actually have to train capacity in all four skins. Again, the book in the description has just one selected capacity builder in each one of these skins. It's been almost my life's work. I'd say, I don't know about almost. I've been studying this stuff for decades. I fixate on minimalist inputs that get extraordinary outcome. I've been obsessed about finding the one lever that moves the needle, and that's what's in the book for each one of these. And there's no secret, I can tell them to you, but how you train them so that the somatic benefits come, there's nuance, there's depth. The book does that, but we could take one example in each category. The deadlift would do it for the warrior, reverse counting or a similar type concentration practice for the sage. Flexibility practice like the forward bend is one penultimate movement or experience for the shapeshifter. And then slow breathing to open the capacities of the asset. Each one of these is a profound practice that if you found yourself in a dominant skin, even just activating it and practicing it regularly, consistently, and pushing the boundaries of your ability in each one of those practices will give you access to the other skin. It will teach you the principles and the felt. It's not a cognitive shift. It is a physical and somatic shift and reorientation in the moment that gives you command over new options. That can be trained. That's what capacity means. And when people talk, again, this is a pet peeve, but people talk about, I need more capacity, I need nervous system capacity. What they are always talking about is capacity in the category of the asset and the shapeshifter, the ability to down-regulate sympathetic arousal and the ability to sense, feel, use your intuition, but that's only half of performance. If you have to get on stage and you have to give a speech, if you're going to get in a boxing ring or an MMA ring, or if you're going into a pressure setting and you're going to have a hard conversation with your partner in life or your kids or whatever it is, great if you can control that. Great if you can come down and do it from a calm and non-aroused state. But that isn't the state of performance under real pressure. The football player on the field is not calm and relaxed. That doesn't enhance their ability to perform. Now they need a balance, they need a range, but they need to be able to control their mind while their heart is racing, right? While their fucking chest is pounding, while their breath is heaving. They don't get to step aside and say, oh, I just need to calm down. Wrong domain. So to reduce capacity to one or two of these four attributes is incredibly limiting to your range, your potential, and your power. Even to be able to go into a boardroom or a board meeting, or if you have to raise money for your business, or anything that is just hard. It's not about being the calm, sedated person. It's about owning your performance, even when it's hard, because that pressure isn't going away. They're not going to adjust for you. You need to rise to the occasion and be able to manage that pressure. Does this make sense? That's what capacity means. That's what nervous system range actually is. Whoo-hee, we having fun? Having fun. To come full circle now, to bring it back to what we started with, the deterioration / the regulators. Now, these start to become incredibly profound as moment-to-moment levers that you can pull for your own psycho-emotional state. We've covered your skin. We've covered what it means to balance your skin and what it means to evolve that skin to be able to access all four. Again, imagine that. Imagine, first of all, eliminating the drag, not being bound to who you think you are because of patterns and habits and comfort zones, to be able to expand into optionality and choose to be any one of these characters because you've got the capacity and the range and you know how to control them. That's what capacity does. That's what understanding how to activate that skin means in real time. But now, to command the skin and to be able to command and float between all four comes back to the regulators. When we are weak, when we don't have capacity, when we don't have conscious awareness in the moment, deteriorations can occur in one of those three categories: structure, attention, breath. Once we start to train them and activate them in real time to know that in this moment I am bringing forward all of my attributes, the fullness of myself, not trying to activate one thing, calm down, settle yourself, ignore pressure, ignore stress, but to say, any environment, pressure, reason, sensing, adapting, I have access to all four of them, and I can merge them, call on one in dominance, or merge all four of them in real time as needed. That is bound by the regulators, which give us conscious command. If we don't fix the gaze, right? In martial arts, looking at your opponent's eyes, and dance, spotting a point on the wall, right? Same thing in yoga, fixating your attention, either distributed to sense and feel or focused to concentrate your energies. All the same patterns emerge. And then structure. Am I stable? Am I balanced? Am I using excessive tension and bracing? Am I too soft and off kilter? Okay, now I'm centered. My attention is fixed and my breath is low and deep. Fixing these. Now, a fair question, the breath doesn't need to always be there. You can still have coherence with upper chest breathing in performance type environments. But to the extent that you have control over it, liberating the diaphragm, which is an energy center and a point of control, loosening tension in that and relaxing and expanding the lower abdomen gives you the full range of the lungs, deep breaths, more oxygen, and it soothes the nervous system, which is why that is the penultimate experience in meditations going back forever. All relaxation practice comes from that breath pattern. So, harnessing these three, learning about yourself, which one of these fails first, how to regain them the most quickly. The regaining of them is always the same. It's fix your structure, stand tall, focus your gaze, and drop the breath. If you don't have structure, you can't fix your breath. If you don't have your eyes fixed or your attention fixed, your breath will get stolen. It'll be unconscious, it'll get taken up. So there is an order to regaining these, and that can happen very quickly, but this has to be practiced. People that think, oh, I just got to implement these three things and that's going to be fine. Yes, and that's true. But also, without a lot of practice, the capacities that underlie them, and then the ability to consciously be aware of your own patterns in real time and then implement them proactively, it takes practice. It's not a quick fix. And for the people that want to focus on, well, these are my patterns, and they want to focus on their way of doing things and like, but I feel this way, or my trauma impacts me in this kind of a way, or all that can be true. But the amazing thing is, all of that goes away in this moment when you just return to center. Incredible. For the next few moments, you can be free of all that shit. You can have control of your body and mind. You can be free of all that drag and all that patterning that's been holding you back and conditioned. And you can choose in the next few moments who you are and how you show up. Again, profanity time. All right, no clue how long this has been, but I've enjoyed every freaking second of it. Hope you have too. Thanks for staying with me. Like I said, if you can take this and run with it, you've got your dreams, you've got your goals, you want more, and good on you. Take this stuff, use it, apply it, get the book if you need to get some of the basics and orient around exactly how some of these pieces fit together so that you can organize a training protocol for yourself that is simplistic, minimalistic, maybe only takes a few minutes a day. That's all it needs to attend to these things. At a high level, takes more, but as a minimum input, you can start to cultivate and balance your skins with minimalist inputs. That's what we've done. It gives you the diagnostics to find out who you are, your defaults, how you show up, how to condition them and move beyond into conscious awareness, how to balance them against other skins, and how to command all four. Incredible. And if you want support, if you want to do it faster, if you want to do it with the insight of me or my wacky cohort Lindsay, who's in a lot of the other videos on this channel, we teach this stuff and we work with it on the regular at the Prestige. Incredible community. Reach out to us. You can either do that through the quiz below. Once you get your results, respond to the email, or reach out to us through the contact page. We'd be more than happy to give you a rundown on what we do, the structure of the Prestige, and how we work on a seasonal basis with cool cats and high performers like you. Reach out, join us. See you next time.